Looking forward also to meeting you. Actually, I've been wanting to join the ECIC conferences for years, but May is a very busy month in the church. There's so much going on, so I never found the time until today. But now it is. And I'm going to talk about strategic communication of the church. And we are shifting track now, let me warn you, because what I'm going to argue here is that when we work with strategies in our communication for the church, there's a number of questions that we should ask ourselves before we even begin working on content. And the last one of those is about technology and media platforms. There's a number of other things that we should make ourselves clear long before. And just to stress that point, I made the decision that I would do this without technology. That's challenging myself as well. It would have been much easier to pull out one of my PowerPoint shows, but I decided that now I'm trying to challenge us all, because sometimes I attended the largest conference on communication really in Copenhagen last week. Petersen was there as well. And there were all these magnificent PowerPoint shows, but the quality of what was said was actually quite different. And sometimes it just distracted the reflection. And I thought, well, now I'll try and do what's forbidden. I'll tell it and not show it. But I hope, along with that, I'll make us all reflect and maybe make us all see it, not on the screen, but for ourselves. So, about myself, I'm originally a pastor. How many of you are theologians of background? Half, more or less. I worked as a pastor for 11 years before I, 10 years ago, more or less, became the leader of the communication on the internet for the church in Denmark. I'm also a master of rhetoric and communication, and recently also public governance. So, in Denmark, for the church, the communication is a bit different, I suppose, than for many of your churches, because we don't have an archbishop, we don't have a synod, or a national church council. We have nobody who, for the gathered church, speak or set goals or choose messages or statements that should be communicated on behalf of the church. We call it a freedom for everybody, every member, every pastor, everyone in the church can speak for themselves and make their position on the common ground that we stand. But working with communication on a national level, it's challenging, of course. But it's a gift also, I'll say, after 10 years working with it, because it challenges us to work with our strategies and set goals, because nobody is setting them for us. So our challenge is communicating the common of the church in a way that reflects the church, in a way that everybody in the church can recognize and mirror themselves in a way that is trustworthy for the way we work as the church. And it's for us to find then the goals, to set the goals for that, how we do it. So we really have to focus on the content. So this is more about content than technologies. And if you remember how Peter Svar finished, I'll remind you of the barista. The future, the nearest future now, at least the coming decades, is human. So let's just set up there. So first thing we need to do when we work with the strategy of our communication is to actually find out what our purpose is. This one, I think I can't. I shouldn't draw on that. Yes, I can. Purpose. This is a buzzword in all communication, and that is a challenge to us. I don't know, are you familiar with this communication, this new tendency that everything is about purpose? Does it ring a bell? I'll not go into depth about it. There's a lot of discussion about it, but right now everyone is working on their purpose when they are defining themselves as companies, which means that large companies who are running the world more than our governments are, basically, they have recognized that the world is longing for larger purposes than growth and profit. Everyone has to have a higher purpose than that. Take Carlsberg, for instance, brewing beer all over the world, the Danish brewing company. They have now, if you visit their webpage, they'll first ask you what year you're born, because everything you'll see after that is defined from what they know about you, in what your age is. And then you'll see a little about beer. There's a beer in any picture, of course, but it's basically about sustainability. It's about how we leave a better planet for the next generation through using less plastic, less water in the production of beer, and a lot of other things they do. So there are two things that we should be aware of as churches. One is that it's expected of everyone who's an actor in society to take responsibility, a larger responsibility than just for your own activity. We take responsibility for the future, for the coming generations, for our planet. This is something that it is about to change the mindset, and it goes very fast. That we, or the audience, the public, will have this expectation to everybody who wants to have a voice in society. The other thing is that purpose is being questioned. Because, take Carlsberg, for instance, if what they really wanted, more than anything else, was leaving a better planet for the next generation, they'd shut down their breweries. But they're not. And of course, everybody is figuring that out. We do know that they want still to make profit. They want to sell us their beers, and they want growth. So we are getting suspicious when we meet these messages about larger purposes. We will soon, the public will even more begin to question this. What's behind it? What do they really want? Is this just something, are they just doing this to look better and to use it as a way of having more market shares? So, the market is stealing purpose. And some people would say that we should quit that because it's just a buzzword, it'll go away, or it'll harm our trustworthiness. I'll say that purpose is ours as churches. We always had a purpose. We don't have to invent it. They have had these huge processes in all big companies about finding their purpose because it's not really granted what purpose they should have. But everybody, whatever they produce, are working on their image by finding and defining these purposes. So they stole purpose from us, or they started copying. Large companies and political parties are in large scale copying churches and religions because they see it works. With rituals, with messages, with the way of preaching, working with ethics and values. But we should even more so focus on our purpose. So we should be aware before we even start opening our computer, why. A few years ago, this would just be the why. So the first question to ask yourself, working with the strategy of your communication, should be why. there's a lot of things we can do. And working with digital communication on the internet, I, for one, am always very fascinated when new options appear, new things you can do, interesting things, good-looking things, things that work. And this can sometimes lead us astray, and we start doing things that others do because it's the new thing. It works for others, so why shouldn't it work for us? And we just start developing. And we sometimes set the technical development department in our churches in the front seat, and content people in the back seat, because now we're doing this. Why shouldn't we? Everybody is. We can't go behind. And of course, we should use new technologies and media platforms wisely, but we do so only by being very, very clear about why we do it. What do we want? Why are we here? In my situation, it's been a very good training path the last 10 years, because when I first started out, I was the only employed person working on the internet for the church. And it was on a very provisionary organization, small funding, and only for 3 years. And certainly a number of people, especially some bishops, hoped and maybe also prayed that the internet would shut down within these 3 years. And then this problem would go away. Because how would that end, having a channel with the church as with the church's name on it, that would sort of push out messages or communicate on behalf of the whole church when nobody's allowed to. And so it didn't shut down, and we had 6 more years, and that also didn't help. So now we're working permanently on it, and we're working on the website. We are now 6 people, and a lot of volunteers and a lot of freelancers that we work with. And we work with social media. Also, we work actually in a very analog way, building up tents in large national events where the church is communicating, taking part just as any other actor in society, especially what we have in Denmark called Folkemødet, which is similar to, there's some Swedes here, Almendalen, yeah. So, just to stress that communication is about content. It's about why we do it, and not just doing it because we can, or looking good in comparison to others. And we should basically communicate the same in a tent in this large festival and on the internet. We can only do it if we know why. So, the purpose of the church and the purpose of a communication platform in the church cannot be the same. That's something I think we as communicators should be very clear about. We are communicating on behalf of the church, but we are not the church. Because communication goals should always be tested by the question, can this goal be reached alone through communication? If it's not, you're going to fail. You can't build a bridge with communication. You need concrete, you need working people, you need water. But you can, through communication, gather support for the idea of building a bridge. You might even be able to fund the bridge building, but you cannot build the bridge. And communicating on behalf of the church from the church is not just the same as being the church. We lose on both sides if we try to just replicate or copy the church in our communication. We don't have the room, the church room, the building. It has something that we cannot just copy that. We can do something else, and we should be very clear about what we want instead of that. And of course, the purpose of what we're doing should reflect the purpose of the church. And the purpose of the church is about human beings. It's not about the church. That's important. In our various Christian traditions, we can put this in different words. We can say the purpose is that human beings find faith, love, and hope, or that they are redeemed from their sins, or that they find salvation, or find their brotherly love, neighbor love with all the other Christians. But it always aims at the human being, at people. And this should be reflected in the purpose of our communication. So the why we are on the internet is not to market the church. It's not to preach. It's not to convert people. It's not even to get more churchgoers or have more baptized. The companies working with purpose makes also our way of working with the purpose seem maybe more commercial. When I give interviews to journalists who want to ask about why we're doing some kind of campaign, they always assume at the outset that we do this because we want more members, or we do this because we want more churchgoers, or we do this because we want to catch the young people. And I always have to say, well, we're not haunting anybody. We're not, in that sense, fishermen that are going out to catch people. We do it because of people. That's actually the final aim. So, the why for us is to strengthen, and I don't know if any of you worked with communication strategies. If you hire some company to do that, you'll have a report of 100 pages, and it'll end up in some drawer somewhere. Well, maybe not. Maybe you really can work on it, but then it asks a lot of time for you and your employees. The why of your communication strategy should be on a memo like this, because that's what everybody working with it can remember, and also always have as an aim of what they're doing, be that preparing a large campaign, working on a new digital platform, or just writing one news article. If they know always the why we are here is to strengthen the relationship between people and church. There's a relationship between almost everybody in the Danish society and the church. But what we are doing with communication is to strengthen that relationship between the individual and the church, and between the people, the public. So we are working basically with communication aimed at everybody, but the aim of it is to strengthen the relationship. So that's the why of what we are doing. And I'll ask you now to take just 1 minute, because it doesn't take long, to talk to the person sitting next to you. Can you, in few words, tell the other one, why are you working for the church? What is the why? How is the why answered for what you're doing, communicating for the church on the internet? Just 1 minute. There you go, 2 and 2. So, thank you. Did anyone have that just in one sentence? No. No. But you will.
They're still thinking.
Yeah, we should be thinking, reflecting, talking to each other about this. Often when you find it, it's like finding something that was always there just in front of you. But it's very, very helpful. And also it saves a lot of working time if you always know why. Because then also it's much easier to prioritize. So you also know what you are not going to do. We are not having services and preaching and a lot of things like that. We don't do that. We don't have large debates about internal church matters, theological disagreements. That's not the why we are there. We are communicating the common church for the public, for the human beings, and focused on those who have a loose relationship, a weak relationship with the church. Because those who have a strong relationship with the church, they know where their local church is. They'll go there. They'll seek that. And those who want communication to strengthen the community that they're already in, churchgoers, regular churchgoers, people who are very committed to church, they have so much communication that they can't even find time to consume it all. There's a lot of what I call auto-communication within the church, which is quite important also. But we do something else, and we are actually the only media in the church dedicated to this. So, the next question is not what. Most would go to what after this. The next question is who. Because the Danish public is our audience. We are obliged to communicate on behalf of the church also as an organization to create transparency and openness about how we work and our finances and everything like that, and to media. But you know, as well as I, if you try to communicate with the whole world as your target group, you will reach no one, very precisely. So the next one is who. Who are we? People are in the purpose of what we are doing overall. So who are we actually addressing? And that's about target groups, of course. And there's a well-spread and good way of working with target groups that comes through analyzing age, education levels, gender, where people live, things like that. That's a normal socio-demographic way of working with target groups. And we have realized that it doesn't really go for the communication of the church. Our target groups are defined in other ways, because the relationship between church and the individual is often defined by the individual in another way. Our overall target group that is prioritized are those that have a loose relationship to the church. But they are many, many different people. I don't know in your churches, but in Denmark, the number of those who go to church every Sunday is always less. But the number of those who are going now and then, every second month, is growing and has been growing quite a lot over the last decades. So more and more people are actually relating to the church, even if they don't relate as what maybe has been seen as real Christians coming every Sunday. So we work on defining this large and growing group. But this is a very large group. We have been trying to work on it in figures and figure out those who are really outside, atheists, belonging to different religions. Of course, we should be there for them as well as church, but as target groups, they are not in focus. It's those who could have more interest and find more value in what they find in the church. those who are seeking something that they might find in the church, and we should make them aware that it's there for them. And it's a very large group. It's more than 2 million people. And we can't always address them all at once. So we define our target groups in campaigns or in the specific topics that we're working with from life situations. Because if we want to address people who have just had their first child, it could be an 18-year-old and it could be a 44-year-old. And it makes it very difficult to really focus at them as a target group. But if we begin to examine, so what defines people who just had their first child, a lot of other things show up. So life situation is very often the situation that defines that people are orienting themselves towards the church. So that is also our way of defining them as target groups. And I suppose you work on very different kinds of media. But could you just spend 1 minute and telling your neighbor at the table what are your main target groups in your work? Who are they? What defines them? You probably all work with different target groups in what you're doing, as we do. I think the clever thing here is to always break it down and say, if we're working on this campaign right now, so we're writing articles, we're doing video, we're making social media content. So who is this for? Do we have something for now? So we break it down and always try to picture. And we even work with personas. Do you know what that means? Yeah, it's quite fun. We tend to spend too long because it's real fun. But we try to picture someone in this target group, and we give them a name, and we find a photo, and we hide it in the back office because we're not allowed to use it, the best one that we find. But then we start building these persons. So we have Maria, who's teaching and has 2 children and is 42 years old, and she lives in a larger province town, and she's interested in and so on and so on and so on. So we actually build these people and we picture them, and when we discuss our content, we ask, would Maria be interested in this? Why should she? And maybe she's not, and maybe it's of no value to her, but then we should find out who we're writing to instead and make sure that there's some value in what we're doing for the people that we target. I'll give you an example later of how we are doing this. The next question after this is what? And the reason why a lot of people, companies, others, would do it the opposite way around, because mostly important is to bring their messages out. More important than the people who it's aimed at. But as churches, we should do it the other way around, because we have something for everybody. We should believe that there's something for every human person in the church to find. Messages, values, activities, community. There's no person that should not be able to find something of value. But when we've realized, of course this goes a little forth and back, but when we've defined who we are actually addressing, we ask ourselves, what would be of value to them that we have in the church? And of course, that depends on... Now, I'll bring you my example here. For a number of years, everybody was saying, are you doing podcasts? Everybody's doing podcasts. Podcast is the new black. And surely a lot of people are doing podcasts. There are lots and lots of podcasts out there. I don't know how much they are all together listened. Well, they are listened a lot. But I think there's a lot of podcasts out there that very few people actually listen to. So we followed the development of podcasts, but we didn't have the why. We didn't know yet what we should do it for. Just recording everything and publishing as a podcast, that doesn't really make sense. But then we discovered that there's a target group that's very interesting for us, and very, very hard for the local churches to reach. And they are the around 30-year-old people who have just left their study life, settled in a more permanent living place, finished their studies, found work, gone from being singles to forming a family, maybe had their first child, moved to a new local area. These people are very, very busy. They are in a formative time of their life, having family, making career, also have a lot of other things that they want to live up to because they grew up, these around 30 years old, they grew up with social media. And creating their own identity is very, very important, or it's been a natural for them all their lives. So there's a lot of other things that they should do. But they reorientate themselves at this specific point with all those changes. And that's where they also see the church again. Maybe because they have a child and they consider, should this child be baptized? But also, of course, because existential themes become more present when becoming a parent. So we realized this, we were working with it because we ran a campaign on baptism that was addressed at the growing number of parents who do not agree or are not sure whether they'll have their child baptized. We had a very good report made in Denmark on these issues that are the most important for parents considering having their child baptized. And running this campaign, addressing those people, we worked more with them, and we thought, what we discovered was that a lot of them actually most of them have their children baptized. Lots of them attend what we in Denmark call baby hymn singing. It's kind of baby rhythmic in the church. If you don't have it, see what it is and have your parishes do it at home, because this is something that about a fifth of all newborn babies are actually attending church once a week for a period in their first months with their mothers, basically, for this. So a lot of parents would bring their children for this offer, maybe even for some of the offers that we have in the churches for young families, eating together, other things. But what we discovered is it's the contacts to these parents always go through the children. There's nothing for them. And asking the churches, they would say that, well, they don't have time. They are so busy. There's no way we can really address them. We can't expect it of them. But they keep bringing their children to the church and they follow. So there must be something of value to themselves as well. And that was something we identified as something we could do actually with communication. So here was a communication goal. If we can find a way of communicating with these people that are so busy, we can give them something of value that they might be seeking, even though they don't have time to spend an evening a week in the church listening to some speech or study group, something like that. So, what do we want to give them? What is the content here? We were looking into what we know about this generation. And they are very concerned with, or they are reflecting very much, more than the generation before them, existential themes. And they are longing for the time when they were students, had no children, could sit up long with their friends and discuss over a bottle of red wine until the early morning. They are longing for that. They don't have that time, and they don't have the time for reading books. A lot of those people who were reading books don't find the time anymore, and they're so tired that when they start reading, they go to sleep because the children keep them awake all night. And so what they long for is presence. It's conversation. It's talking to somebody about something important. It's existential themes. And it's the community that it creates having this kind of communication. So that was what we wanted them to. We wanted to demount this being special, working on your identity, because you have to give up at that point if you haven't done it before. There's no way you can work that hard on being special if you have little children and a new career. It's just too much. So we wanted to focus on the common existential, what we all share, but in a way that we can reflect and make it our own. So it's okay to be normal. The feeling of it's okay, let go, it's fine, it's the best actually, because when you are like everybody else, or you share the same things, you're actually in community with them. So that was the next step. And in this case, when we move to the next question, the how, or where, we can take them under one. This is where the technology and the media platforms is answered. So we wanted to present this target group with something that could give them this space that we might find in the church, talking to other people about important common issues. But we wanted to give it to them in another form where they are. And we had an analysis made, or we ordered it in some communication company, analysis over media behavior in this target group. And that's where we found out that now we should do podcast. Because precisely this target group love podcast. That's what they can do. They can listen to podcast while doing transportation or doing housework, and that's how they use it. That's where they find this space of reflection already. So only there we decided to do podcasts. And I'll give you, because now I chose to be very analog. So here you have the postcards that was part of this campaign. The name of it is Næstekaffe. It's a combination of neighbor in neighbor love and coffee instead of love. So neighbor coffee. And in Danish, næste is not what we use as neighbor, people living next to us. It's very much associated with the idea of neighbor love. So neighbor coffee is conversations. It's not one interviewing the other one, but it's conversations between a pastor and somebody that is popular in this target group. And it's about existential themes: happiness, meaning, community, hope, fear. So they're having this conversation. And so the large work was actually casting these two people who should have the conversation, preparing them through interviews, finding somebody who would match each other in a conversation as equals. So pastors who would not get too starstruck in a conversation with a very famous person. But also finding somebody who had something in common and making the premise that they should both give something personal of themselves. They should be willing to this, but also make them curious of the other person. And this podcast came up very successfully. And it's been listened a lot. Within a month, it had 10,000 listens. And now we've been appointed for both a prize and we're going to some podcast festival in 2 weeks, actually, to do podcast live. And it's got a lot of attention. And it's one example, I'd say, that doing this in the right order, having a clear strategy, and answering our questions in the right order made us reach a goal. If we had just set out when podcasts got very popular and decided that now we also want one, I doubt that we would have ended up there. So that's one concrete example of how we are doing it. In general, I'd say we work also with very analog ways that we get very familiar to. Like this target or this overall purpose is very clear to everyone working there. We have methods of working with it in every day. And one is whenever we communicate something, if it has a goal, it can be 3 different things that we want to create with this communication. This is usually campaigns, but can also be just smaller themes, or videos, or just single content productions. So we ask ourselves, what do we want to create? What do we want to give to the audience here? And there are 3 different things you can give. One is a feeling, emotion. Second, knowledge. And third, reflection, or action. So, do we want people to feel something? That's not illegitimate. Give them a feeling of belonging to a place that is, or a community that is good, safe, built on the right values. Do we want to give them knowledge? Is there something they should know? Maybe there are prejudices out there, myths about Christianity or about church that we want to punctuate. Maybe we want to change positions through knowledge. But maybe there's just basically something they should know. Or they should be able to find the knowledge if they're seeking it, and better with us than with other places. Or do we want them to take action on something? That's the hardest thing. That really, really asks a lot. So if we want to create commitment through our communication, it demands more than if we want to give knowledge about something. But we should always make clear at what level we're working. What do we want to offer and create out there? And then we have content in 3 levels also. This is where I should have chosen, actually, the PowerPoint, I realize now. I thought we would be... Yeah. Can you see anything? No. Very good. I'll tell it. We have 3 layers that we work in on every important content theme that we work with. One in the middle is information. So we are communicating on behalf of a very large organization. A lot of people are attending it in different situations of their lives. They should be able to find information on everything they seek. So, how do I get my child baptized? Why do we celebrate Pentecost? What are our tax fee used for? So information, just real good communicated knowledge should be given on every topic that we work with. Then we have the actuality, that's not the right word in English. So the news, this is happening here and now. We should tell what's new. We should tell what is our tendencies. We should tell what is important new knowledge that has come forth about us or about people and our relationship to them. And then we have the reflection level. And here we do the podcast, but we do also articles and videos that are longer, give the opportunity of diving in, getting inspired, curious, finding more. And on every theme that we work with, we try to combine these. So, be it baptism, there's right now a work going on with the liturgy of baptism. We might decide, after a long debate, to work on changes on the liturgy of baptism. Also, there are new forms of baptism, drop-in baptism, and more adults getting baptized. These are news, and we can inform how it's done, where do you find it, what is it about, and then we interview people who tell their personal stories, or we interview people who can fill this out, theologians, pastors, other experts, and people who share their personal experience. In all, this information level is a pull level. This is where people usually come in from Google. And we work always with CU, of course, and we're quite high-ranked, very high-ranked actually, because we've been doing it for 10 years now. So a lot of people enter the web page here because they Google something. And then we combine these levels because we want them to stay. So we make sure that from here they find what's new on this area. And also we invite them to read something or watch something that's longer and gives more perspectives on it, more knowledge, or asks them more questions, so make them relate more. And all together, this is how we strengthen the relationship of the individual. Also how we communicate, of course, to the public and media. But inviting people to find and reflect more is also a way of giving them the experience of this as something valuable and important to themselves. Yeah. So, working with communication strategies like this is, I'd say, working on building and maintaining a culture. And in this way, we as communication people in the church have great influence, and we should also be aware of that, because we also are examples of how other parts of the church is communicating. We're inspiring them. We should, but also we are building up a culture, and cultures have values, and we have 3 values, value words, that are on our walls, so that nobody misses it or we are constantly reminded. the values of what we're doing are community. We want to support the building of community. Meaning in Danish is deeper than meaning. It's not a position. That things make sense to me. And presence. We always have the person, the one that you can identify with, in the focus. So no matter what story we do, even the news, usually, our primary source, the first one to comment or to say the picture, is a normal person, somebody actually relating to the church in this specific matter. And then the next source will be a pastor, a bishop, an expert, explaining why is this important, what does it say about our work, and trying to reflect the personal experience of the primary source. So into very detailed planning, this overall strategy is transformed in what we do. And now I had planned you to reflect further over your work. Are there some value words that carries everything you do? But time's running out, so I think instead we just have 2 minutes. You should be allowed to ask a question.
Two questions.
Yes?
You said you try to draw people to your website. Please, louder. You said you try to draw people to your website to re-establish contact. But couldn't you take that one step further ahead? That if I try to go to a movie theater or a restaurant, I Google it, and directly from there I either call up the restaurant or I just order the tickets for the movie online. If I want to find a church for a baptism, I do not want to have the church's website, but I want to have the service, the baptism. So I want to have direct contact with the pastor. That's something we have something partly. We're working on a new map solution, and that should make it even the link even closer between the search and then we are working on digital services through which you can actually interact with the church on these matters. We haven't come to baptism, but after death, for instance, you can actually on a digital formula directly ask for the funeral and the contact to the pastor. So we're working on that also, yes, because that's an expectation with most people that you can, just as finding your restaurant or whatever, you can use these digital ways into the church for contact. Yeah, but we've got a lot more to do on that. Yeah, something else?
I'm not sure. At the beginning, you told that communication isn't the church. And in the end, it sounds like you are the church. In between the people there, and your website, and giving information and knowledge.
I should make it more clear maybe. The purpose of our activities are not identical. Of course, we're part of the church. But what we do is not identical to how you would define the purpose of what the church does, because we do communication. So we cannot build a new church. There are things that we cannot do. Well, in Minecraft, yes, but not in real life. We cannot build a church. We should be very specific about what we actually can do with communication, and not just digitalize what's happening in the church, because that's also reducing our potentials. We can do something else that really supports what's happening in the local parish, diocese, and so on. But if we just copy or digitalize things, we're actually losing on both parts, I think. But we create interest for, we point at, make the feeling of the relationship to the actual church stronger. That's how I define it.
There's a taxi coming,
Yes,
and I need to be aware of your time.
thank you.
Ellen, you have given inspiration to us, but the discussion has just started. So you really ought to have been here.
I would have
for
loved
the whole
to.
conference.
Yes.
But now you can be absolved from that to tell those whom you are together with this afternoon that there is this conference, and I think Ralph Peter has some very intelligent way of doing what we don't even know here in Denmark about his questions. So you could also learn from him. And that's the meaning of this conference, that we get inspiration, reflection, and the things we can learn from one another. But thank you very much. It has been interesting. And one of the podcasts was made with one of my colleagues at home. So I can, I can agree that this. You just learn Danish, and then you listen to the podcasts because they are very, very interesting. And I think it's right that you should be awarded for this way of making next coffee virtually. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have, as a small token of our gratitude.
Barolo.
And I know it's good because
good.
I have tasted it.
Oh, good.
But probably you won't be able to take it on the flight.
No.
So would you?
Yeah, I've got a suitcase actually. I can.
Oh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.